Mindset, the invisible place where your life is being decided. Maybe the biggest mistake you've made in life wasn't a wrong decision. Maybe it was believing too early what others told you about who you were. Before the failures, before the attempts, before you even had dreams. Someone, or something, taught you what to expect from yourself. And since then you've been living inside that expectation. Most people think they suffer because they lack talent, luck, or opportunity. But the quietest suffering is born when you believe that this is just how you are. When you confuse identity with limitation. When you think mistakes reveal who you are, instead of realizing they only reveal where you're still learning. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck isn't just about mentality. It's about inner freedom. About how the way you interpret effort, mistakes, and failure defines how much you grow or how much you hide. And almost no one notices this while it's happening. Maybe you didn't stop trying because you're incapable. Maybe you stopped because you learned to be afraid. Afraid of making mistakes. Afraid of looking incompetent. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of discovering that you're not fixed, you're unfinished. And that's frightening, but it's also liberating. Today, I invite you to look at this invisible place, where your decisions are being made without you realizing it. Not to judge yourself, but to understand. Because when awareness arrives, growth begins. The invisible judgment, the voice that decides who you believe you are. There's a voice that speaks to you all the time. It quietly comments on every attempt, every mistake, every comparison. It doesn't shout. It doesn't impose itself. But it decides a lot. It decides whether you try again. It decides whether you put yourself out there. It even decides who you believe you are. Before any external result appears, that inner voice has already passed judgment. And the strange thing is that most of us obey it without ever truly listening to it. For years I thought that voice was me. That the automatic thoughts, this isn't for you, you're not good at this, better not try, were just realism. They weren't. They were conditioning. They were an invisible mindset formed long before I was aware of myself. Carol Dweck explains this with surgical precision in Mindset. But experience always runs deeper than theory. From early on we learn that making mistakes hurts. Not because mistakes themselves are painful, but because of the emotional meaning attached to them. Mistakes become symbols of incompetence, of personal failure, of not being good enough. And without noticing, the mind builds an internal courtroom, where every action is judged before it's even lived. This isn't just psychology, it's identity under construction. The problem was never the mistake. The problem is the label placed on it. When a child is praised as smart only when they get things right, they learn something dangerous, that their worth depends on performance. That's the silent birth of the fixed mindset, a mentality that may protect at first, but demands a high price over time. Constant fear of mistakes, of trying, of learning. Here's what most people miss. The human mind labels things to feel safe. It prefers a limited identity to an open field of possibilities, because growth requires facing the unknown, and the unknown is frightening. That's why so many people confuse stability with peace, when in reality they're just standing still. I've seen this in workplaces, classrooms, relationships. Brilliant people shrinking themselves to avoid looking incompetent. Adults who stopped learning because learning requires mistakes. And for them, mistakes still mean, I'm not enough. This isn't a lack of ability. It's a damaged relationship with the inner growth process. If you pay attention right now, you'll notice this voice doesn't show up only in big challenges. It appears in small, everyday decisions. When you think about studying something new and quit before starting. When you stay silent in a meeting. When you scroll through social media, compare yourself, and feel that quiet tightness in your chest. Right there, in that moment, mindset reveals itself without words. And maybe the most unsettling truth is this. Before any external failure happens, an internal judgment is already taking place. It decides whether you'll interpret the experience as learning, or as proof of inadequacy. That judgment didn't come with you at birth. It was learned. And everything that's learned can be re-examined. But not yet. Not before we look at the root of fear. Because deep down, maybe you're not afraid of failing. Maybe you're afraid of what failure says about who you believe you are. And as long as that identity stays rigid, every mistake will feel like a threat. This is where the story begins to deepen. And exactly where the next layer of awareness starts to emerge. Fixed mindset, when identity becomes a prison. There's a quiet moment when identity stops being shelter and becomes a cell. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, almost gently. The mind starts by saying, this is who you are. Then it adds, and this is all you can be. The fixed mindset, as Carol Dweck describes in Mindset, is born right there. Not from arrogance, but from emotional self-protection. At its core, this mindset doesn't want growth. It wants safety. It wants to preserve an inner image that says, I'm good at this, or I'm not good at that. It sounds harmless, but it's dangerous. Because when identity is fused with performance, every challenge becomes a threat. Every mistake feels like symbolic death. The ego doesn't want to grow. It wants to survive. And that changes everything. I've lived this firsthand. There were periods in my life when I avoided learning new things. Not because I lacked interest, but because I was afraid of looking incompetent. I preferred being average at something I already knew, over being a beginner at something that could expand me. Looking back now, I see it clearly. That wasn't humility. It was fear of mistakes disguised as prudence. A classic fixed mindset move. This mentality creates a constant need to prove your worth. You don't act to learn, you act to confirm who you think you are. When things go well, you feel relief. When they don't, you collapse internally. The mind doesn't ask, what can I learn from this? It asks, what does this say about me? And that question, repeated for years, shapes your entire relationship with life. At work, this shows up subtly. People who don't ask for help to avoid looking weak. Professionals who don't apply for promotions because they're not ready yet, when in truth, no one ever is. In career development, the fixed mindset creates safe careers, but narrow ones. Stable but soulless. Growth requires exposure. And exposure requires accepting the possibility of mistakes. In relationships, the pattern repeats. When someone believes, this is just how I am, they shut the door on dialogue and personal evolution. Arguments become ego battles. Feedback feels like attack. Apologies feel like humiliation. All because identity must be defended. And the more it's defended, the less room there is for love to mature. Success psychology shows us something counterintuitive. The more rigid the identity, the more fragile it becomes. All it takes is one comment, one rejection, one public failure, and the entire inner structure shakes. That's why people trapped in a fixed mindset swing. Between pride and shame. Between superiority and inadequacy. There's never real rest. Maybe you recognize this in yourself. Maybe not everywhere, but in certain areas. Money, relationships, intelligence, spirituality. The mind chooses a label and says, you can go this far and no further. And without realizing it, you begin avoiding anything that threatens that narrative. Challenges stop being invitations. They become dangers. Here's the most delicate point. The fixed mindset disguises itself as identity. It makes you believe that changing is betrayal. That trying something new means abandoning who you are. But that isn't truth. That's attachment. And excessive attachment always creates suffering. The philosophy of learning begins when we realize identity isn't something to protect. It's something to allow to evolve. As long as you need to prove who you are, you'll run from anything that could transform you. And maybe that's why so many people say they want change, but freeze when opportunity appears. Because change doesn't just threaten comfort. It threatens the story you've been telling about yourself. And this is exactly where fear of mistake stops being personal and becomes cultural. Because this prison wasn't built only inside you. It was reinforced by a world that taught performance before learning. And that's where the next layer of this process begins to reveal itself. Fear of mistakes and the performance culture. There's a fear that doesn't originate inside us. It's learned. It's taught with good intentions. But it leaves deep marks. From an early age, we learn that the ones who matter most are the ones who get it right quickly, who get high grades, who don't cause problems. Very little is said about curiosity, process, or trial. Mistakes become something to hide. And without realizing it, we enter a performance culture, where appearing capable matters more than becoming capable. In school, it starts innocently enough. Tests, grades, rankings, public praise. The child learns that love comes after success. Applause comes after results. Learning itself is rarely celebrated. In Mindset, Carol Dweck shows how this model creates adults who are highly functional, but emotionally insecure. People who know how to deliver, but don't know how to experiment. The problem is that the mind generalizes. What begins in the classroom spreads to life itself. At work, your worth becomes measured by metrics, feedback, comparisons. On social media, by likes and external validation. Gradually, the fixed mindset strengthens. Making mistakes in public becomes synonymous with humiliation. And to avoid the pain, many people simply stop trying. I see this all the time. Intelligent adults who say, "That's not for me," before they even begin. People who abandon courses, projects, dreams, not because they lack ability, but because learning requires passing through the space of, "I don't know yet." And "I don't know yet" hurts those who learned that value and performance are the same thing. Success psychology teaches us something uncomfortable. The mind prefers safe stagnation over uncertain growth. Even when stagnation hurts, it's predictable. Growth isn't. Growth requires exposure, vulnerability, and time. And in a performance-driven logic, time is seen as weakness. We want fast results to prove we're good, not to actually become better. In professional development, this creates a strange cycle. Capable people who don't update their skills because they fear looking outdated. Leaders who don't admit doubts to preserve authority. Teams that hide mistakes instead of fixing them. It looks like efficiency, but it's just organized fear. And the bill always comes later, as burnout, frustration, or a quiet sense of emptiness. This fear doesn't stop at work. It invades personal life. You avoid hard conversations to avoid being wrong. You avoid changing habits to avoid failing again. You avoid trying new things because the first attempt is never graceful. Mistakes stop being a natural step and become a verdict. And when that happens, personal evolution freezes. A simple but powerful practice starts here. Notice your immediate reaction to mistakes. When something goes wrong, do you shut down or do you get curious? Do you blame yourself or investigate? Replacing, "What does this say about me?" with "What can this teach me?" seems small, but it restructures your entire inner architecture. That's how a growth mindset begins to form, even if timidly. If you want to experience this in practice, try learning something where you will deliberately be a beginner. A musical instrument, a new language, writing, meditation. Something where mistakes are inevitable, not to perform, but to retrain your relationship with error. This kind of practice educates the mind more deeply than any theory ever could, because the problem isn't that you stopped learning, it's that you learned to be afraid. And as long as mistakes are seen as enemies, growth will always be postponed. But there comes a moment when the pain of stagnation starts speaking louder than the fear of trying. And that's when something inside begins to shift. Growth mindset, the day mistakes stop being a threat. There's a quiet moment when something relaxes inside you. Not because life got easier, but because the mind stopped fighting the process. The growth mindset, as Carol Dweck describes in Mindset, doesn't begin with an explosion of confidence. It begins with a sigh, a cautious but honest, "Maybe I can learn." And that changes everything. The real shift isn't believing you can do anything. It's stopping the belief that you're always the same. When the mind understands that skills can be developed, mistakes lose their power to threaten. They stop being sentences and become data, information, raw feedback from reality. A growth mindset doesn't romanticize failure, but it doesn't demonize it either. It integrates it. I remember clearly the first time I experienced this in real life. Something went wrong. And for the first time, I didn't attack myself internally. Instead, I asked, "What exactly here hasn't been learned yet?" That simple question pulled me out of identity and into process. That's when emotional intelligence truly began to mature. In a growth mindset, effort isn't humiliation. It's the path. The mind stops saying, "If I were good, this would be easy," and starts understanding that difficulty isn't a sign of incapacity, it's a sign of expansion. This completely transforms your relationship with learning, work, and self-development. You no longer measure yourself by how fast you learn, but by your willingness to continue. There's something deeply spiritual about this. Learning requires humility. It requires admitting you don't know, that you haven't mastered it yet, that you're under construction. That challenges the ego, but it also liberates it. When you stop defending yourself, energy becomes available for growth. Learning stops being a theory and becomes something lived. In the body, in time, and in practice. In daily life, this shift appears in small gestures. You ask for help without shame. You listen to feedback without closing your heart. You try again without dramatizing the first fall. In professional development, this creates careers that are longer, more flexible, and more aligned with who you're becoming, not just who you've been. A practical exercise that helps a lot here is observing your inner language, replacing "I'm not good at this" with "I'm still learning." Seems simple, almost naive, but that small word, "still," creates psychological space for growth. It creates time. And where there's time, there's possibility. Carol Dweck shows that people with a growth mindset don't run from challenges. They don't seek them out of masochism, but because they understand something essential. Challenges are disguised invitations. Every difficulty carries a latent skill, waiting to be developed. This doesn't eliminate fear, but it makes it manageable. Fear stops being in charge, and something curious happens. Self-esteem becomes more stable, not because you succeed more often, but because your worth no longer swings with every result. You begin to feel worthy, even while you're learning. That's a far healthier foundation for personal growth than any external praise. But this new relationship with mistakes also brings an important consequence. It changes how you experience effort, because growth hurts. It always has. The difference now is that the pain starts to make sense. And when pain has meaning, it stops feeling like punishment and starts to feel like a rite of passage. And this is exactly where we need to go deeper. Because understanding mistakes is only the beginning. The real challenge is learning how to relate to effort, discomfort, and the unavoidable pain of becoming someone new. Effort, pain, and meaning, what no one taught you about evolving. There's a quiet lie many people carry with them. The idea that those who are truly good don't suffer. As if real talent came with permanent ease. As if effort were a disguised sign of failure. The book Mindset by Carol Dweck dismantles this illusion with elegance. But life dismantles it with persistence. Because growth hurts. It always has. The difference lies in the meaning we give to that pain. In a fixed mindset, effort is experienced as humiliation. Almost like a public confession of incapacity. If this is hard, something must be wrong with me. In a growth mindset, effort takes on a different role. It becomes evidence of expansion. A sign that you're crossing old limits. The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes its emotional address. I had to learn this through experience. There were periods when I judged myself harshly for struggling. I compared my pace to others and felt behind. Only later did I realize that pain wasn't a flaw. It was my body and mind reorganizing. Learning something new requires dismantling old structures. And dismantling always causes discomfort. There's a crucial difference between pain that destroys and pain that builds. The first comes from internal violence. Excessive self-criticism, constant comparison, meaningless urgency. The second comes from a conscious commitment to inner growth. It's the pain of staying present, even when the process isn't pretty. This distinction completely changes how you experience personal development. In success psychology, there's a rarely discussed paradox. The more meaning you give to effort, the less it drains you. When suffering is experienced as punishment, it exhausts. When it's experienced as a ritual of transformation, it strengthens. Not because it becomes easy, but because it becomes understandable. The mind tolerates what makes sense. In everyday life, this shifts simple questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this so hard for me?" you begin to ask, "What exactly is being trained here?" Patience, discipline, communication, focus. Every difficulty points to a specific skill. That's still maturing. This conscious reading turns frustration into a map. If you want to apply this concretely, observe an area of your life where resistance shows up repeatedly. Studying, taking care of your body, managing finances, developing a new professional skill. Instead of running from the pain, get curious about it. Write down what you feel, what you think, where you get stuck. This simple act of observation is already a powerful exercise in self-awareness. Carol Dweck reminds us that people with a growth mindset don't romanticize suffering, but they also don't avoid it at all costs. They know that conscious effort is part of the path, and this creates something rare. Resilience without hardness. Strength without rigidity. A kind of firmness that doesn't close the heart. In professional development, this posture makes all the difference. Professionals who understand the value of effort don't quit at the first criticism, and don't define themselves by a project that went wrong. They learn from mistakes, adjust course, and continue. Not out of stubbornness, but out of commitment to their own evolution. Maybe effort isn't a sign that you're weak, but that you're alive, that you're still in motion, that you haven't abandoned yourself. And when this understanding begins to settle, an inevitable question arises. What happens when, despite all the effort, you fail? When pain comes with criticism, rejection, or public setback? That's where the story becomes more delicate. Because failure doesn't define you, what you do afterward does. Failure, criticism, and rejection. What you do next says everything. Failure hurts. Criticism hurts. Rejection hurts. No matter how much psychology or spirituality you study, the emotional impact still happens. The difference isn't whether you feel it, it's what you do next. Carol Dweck shows in Mindset that it's in this after. That mindset becomes clearly visible, not in success, but in the response to the fall. In a fixed mindset, criticism feels like a personal attack. The mind goes into defense mode. Denial, justification, external blame. Something inside closes to protect itself. In a growth mindset, criticism is received as imperfect but useful data, not as absolute truth, but as a partial mirror. That difference changes destinies. I had to learn this the hard way. There were times when a single comment was enough to shake entire days. Not because the comment was cruel, but because I believed it said something final about who I was. Only later did I understand. The pain didn't come from the criticism. It came from the fusion of performance and identity. When you confuse yourself with the result, any evaluation becomes a verdict. Emotional intelligence begins to mature. When you learn to separate personal worth from performance, you can fail and still be worthy. You can hear no and still be whole. You can fail publicly and still keep learning. That's not indifference. It's grounding. It's having a center that doesn't sway with every wind. In practical life, this changes concrete behaviors. Instead of reacting immediately to criticism, you pause and ask, what here is useful? Not all of it will be. Some criticism is projection. Some is poorly expressed. But almost always there's a point of adjustment hidden inside. Learning from mistakes requires this mature listening, without submission and without arrogance. In professional development, this skill is decisive. People who grow aren't those who make fewer mistakes, but those who correct better. They use feedback to refine processes, communication, and strategy. Those stuck in a fixed mindset waste energy defending image. Instead of improving delivery, one protects the ego, the other builds competence. Rejection also teaches a lot. A project that doesn't move forward, a proposal turned down, a relationship that ends. The fixed mind interprets this as proof of inadequacy. The growing mind asks, what does this show me about alignment, readiness, or context? That change in question doesn't remove the pain, but it prevents pain from becoming identity. A simple exercise helps here. After criticism or failure, write 2 lists. In the first, everything your mind says about you. In the second, only observable facts and possible adjustments. This distance trains awareness. Over time, you realize that most suffering comes from the narrative, not the event. Success psychology reminds us, maturity isn't hardening. It's knowing how to process, to feel, to understand, to adjust, and to move on, without denying pain, without drowning in it. This balance is rare and deeply liberating. And when you learn to relate differently to failure and criticism, something begins to shift naturally, the way you relate to others. Because those who don't feel threatened inside stop threatening outside. That's when mindset starts showing up. In relationships, leadership, and love. Relationships, leadership, and love through the lens of mindset. How you relate to others reveals a lot about how you relate to yourself. This applies to love, friendship, work, and leadership. Mindset by Carol Dweck makes this clear. There's no individual growth that doesn't spill into relationships. Where there's fear of mistakes, there's control. Where there's openness to learning, there's mutual development. In a fixed mindset, relationships tend to become rigid. People are expected to meet static expectations. When someone changes, grows, or fails, the bond goes into crisis. Criticism becomes accusation. Differences become threats. Love becomes conditional on emotional performance. That's exhausting and unhealthy. I've seen this in deep relationships. Couples unable to evolve because one needs to always be right. Friendships broken by pride. Workplaces where no one feels safe making mistakes. All of this comes from the same place. The belief that change is dangerous. And when change feels dangerous, control seems safer. In a growth mindset, the relationship becomes a learning space. Conflicts aren't seen as failures of the bond, but as points of adjustment. Difficult conversations aren't avoided, they're navigated with respect. The other person stops being a mirror for validation and becomes a companion in evolution. That requires emotional maturity and courage. In leadership, this difference is even clearer. Fixed mindset leaders create fear-based environments. People work to avoid mistakes, not to improve. Growth-minded leaders create spaces where learning is valued. They correct without humiliating, guide without diminishing. They don't create dependent followers. They develop capable people. In professional development, this produces teams that are more creative, responsible, and engaged. When mistakes don't mean being discarded, people take more conscious risks. And where there's conscious risk, there's innovation. Collective success psychology depends on emotional safety. In love, the principle is the same. Loving someone isn't expecting perfection. It's walking together through the process. Healthy relationships aren't conflict-free, but those where conflict doesn't threaten abandonment. When you look at the other with curiosity instead of judgment, something transforms. The relationship grows, because people grow within it. A simple practical exercise. Observe how you react to someone else's mistake. Do you close off? Accuse? Withdraw? Or do you ask, listen, and propose adjustment? Your automatic reaction reveals your mindset, more than any speech ever could. Changing that reaction is daily emotional intelligence training. Carol Dweck shows that growth-minded relationships are built on something rare, the belief that people can evolve. That's not naive. It's responsible, because loving, leading, and coexisting require presence, dialogue, and willingness to learn from mistakes, your own and others. As you change how you see others, you also change how you see yourself, because the judgment you project outward is often the same one you apply inward. And as this awareness expands, an inevitable question arises. How do you turn this new perspective into daily, consistent practice? That's where theory must become habit, because understanding matters, but rewiring the mind takes training. Rewiring the mind, how to change a mindset in real life. Changing a mindset isn't a one-time transformational event. It's not a beautiful insight that fixes everything. It's training, conscious repetition, observing your own mind in daily life, and patiently teaching it a new path. Carol Dweck makes this clear in Mindset. Mentality is built through practice, not desire. The first place this change begins is internal language. What you say to yourself after a mistake shapes your relationship with learning. Phrases like, "That's just how I am," or "I wasn't born for this," seem harmless, but they reinforce a fixed mindset. Replacing them with, "I'm still learning," or "What can I adjust?" creates psychological space for inner growth. A second essential point is the questions you ask after failure. The fixed mind asks, "Why am I like this?" The growing mind asks, "What can be improved here?" This simple shift moves focus from identity to process. And where there's process, there's possibility. That's one of the foundations of applied learning philosophy. Practically, this can be trained through small rituals. At the end of the day, choose one situation that didn't go as planned. Instead of criticizing yourself, write 3 things: what happened, what you felt, and what can be learned. This exercise builds self-awareness and strengthens emotional intelligence over time. Another key shift is replacing approval with progress. Many people only feel okay when they receive external praise. That creates emotional dependency. One way to reprogram this is by creating internal metrics: consistency, effort, clarity, presence. Ask yourself, was I slightly better today than yesterday? That question feeds a healthy winning mindset. In professional development, this means celebrating adjustments, not just outcomes. Learning skills like communication, writing, or leadership requires exposure. Books like The 4-Hour Workweek, Timothy Ferriss, Essentialism, Greg McKeown, and Mindset by Carol Dweck help reinforce this practical view of continuous evolution. It's also crucial to observe who you surround yourself with. Environments shape mindset. People who ridicule mistakes reinforce fear. People who value learning strengthen growth. Whenever possible, stay close to those who talk about process, not just success. That accelerates personal growth without internal violence. One subtle but powerful detail: celebrate effort. Not excessively, but consciously. Acknowledge when you tried despite fear, when you stayed despite discomfort. This teaches the brain that effort is worth it, and gradually resistance softens. You don't change the mind through force. You change it through awareness, repetition, and kindness. Rewiring doesn't happen when everything goes right. It happens mainly when something goes wrong, and you choose to respond differently. When that choice becomes habit, something larger begins to emerge. Because in the end, changing your mindset isn't about arriving faster. It's about who you become along the way. And that's exactly what we need to contemplate now. Life is a process. Who you become matters more than where you arrive. There comes a moment in life when you realize you've been asking the wrong question. For years we ask, where do I need to get to? When maybe the most honest question was always, Who am I becoming while I walk? Mindset by Carol Dweck points to this subtle but profound shift. Life isn't a final exam. It's an ongoing process of awareness and growth. When you release obsession with immediate results, something inside relaxes. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about what truly matters. Identity stops being a fixed point and becomes a flow. You're not what you succeeded at yesterday, nor what you failed at today. You are the movement between those 2 points. That's the essence of consciousness and growth. A growth mindset invites you to live with more presence. Instead of measuring worth by comparison, you measure by alignment. Instead of running to prove, you walk to learn. This shift brings a rare kind of peace. Not the peace of arrival, but the peace of not abandoning yourself along the way. I see this clearly in people who've become gentler with themselves over time. They haven't necessarily won by the world's standards, but they're whole inside. They've learned from mistakes, adjusted course, changed their minds. That's personal evolution at its most mature. Quiet, consistent, real. In success psychology, there's a little discussed trap. Winning without growing. Hitting goals while losing curiosity, humility, and the ability to learn. Mindset reminds us that true success is sustainable. It doesn't require hardening, only continued expansion. When you accept life as process, fear softens. Mistakes stop being threats. Starting over stops being shame. Changing direction stops being failure. You understand that identity isn't something to defend, but something to shape over time. This turns personal development into a daily spiritual practice. There's something deeply liberating about replacing comparison with evolution. Instead of looking sideways to measure yourself, you look inward and listen. Progress becomes quieter. It happens in small daily choices. Trying again, listening better, adjusting with more awareness. That's how inner growth consolidates. And maybe the greatest gift of this path is this. You no longer need to win to feel worthy. You feel worthy while learning, while growing, while continuing. That changes everything. Your relationship with time, with others, and with yourself. Maybe the greatest success of your life won't be winning, but continuing to grow without abandoning yourself. And now that this understanding has settled, it's time to bring it into real life, into an ordinary, simple, everyday story, where all of this stops being concept and becomes choice. When all of this becomes life, the quiet choice to continue. Let me tell you a simple story. It's not about someone extraordinary. It's exactly the opposite. It's about someone ordinary, like me, like you. Imagine a person who wakes up early, commutes, works hard, but carries that strange feeling of always being one step behind. They've tried to change things before. A course they abandoned. A project they didn't finish. An idea that died before being born. Not from lack of ability, but from something subtler. Fear of failing again. One day this person receives difficult feedback at work. Nothing aggressive, just honest. Something tightens inside. The old voice appears. See? You're not good enough. For a few minutes, everything feels familiar. Internal defense. The urge to shut down. To blame. To quit quietly. But that day something changes. Instead of reacting automatically, they breathe. For the first time they choose not to attack themselves. They choose to listen. Not to diminish themselves, but to learn. They remember that mistakes aren't identity. That effort isn't weakness. That growth doesn't happen without discomfort. They're unnoticed by anyone else. A new mindset begins to be practiced. In the following days, this person makes small, different choices. They write down what can be improved. Ask for help without shame. Study with more patience. Stop comparing so much. They begin measuring progress, not perfection. Mistakes still happen, but they no longer paralyze. Criticism still hurts, but it no longer defines. Nothing magical happens from the outside in. The salary doesn't double. Life doesn't turn into a movie, but something far more important happens inside. They begin trusting the process. They start growing without abandoning themselves. They live a growth mindset, not as theory, but as daily practice. Months later, looking back, they realize something profound. The greatest gain wasn't the result. It was who they became while trying. More aware, more whole, more free. Life didn't become perfect, but it became true. And that changes everything. Maybe this story isn't about someone. Maybe it's about you. Maybe today is the day you stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, backhand index pointing right, who could I become if I continue? Because the real power of mindset by Carol Dweck isn't in promising fast success. It's in giving back something far more valuable. The courage to learn from mistakes, to change your mindset, and to live inner growth as a path, not as pressure. So now I ask you, calmly and honestly, where are you defending yourself when you could be learning? What area of your life needs less judgment and more curiosity? What would change if you stopped proving your worth and started building it? If this video brought you clarity, relief, or even a small inner shift, don't let it pass. Apply it. Choose one real situation in your life and respond differently. A different response is already personal evolution. And if you want to keep going deeper into success psychology, learning philosophy, emotional intelligence, and conscious growth, subscribe to the channel The Philosophy of Awareness and the Soul, and turn on notifications. Here, the journey isn't about conquering the world. It's about not losing yourself.